There's been a lot of talk in the media about gifted programs and the GATE program lately. GATE stands for Gifted and Talented Education. Everyone from Blair White, who not too long ago had Harvard UFO attorney Danny Sheehan on, and they talked about the GATE program. She said she was a part of it. Then we have people like Candace Owens claiming that Charlie was part of the program, and even some people on Reddit forums talking about how he was part of Quest. I even saw a Facebook article today about Candace Owens saying she was recruited for some kind of X-Men type gifted program. So whether or not that is true, let me know. But the point of bringing it all up is that people are talking about it. Can't seem to get away from it online, on TikTok, on Facebook, etc. And now the fact that it's actually being talked about by public influencers, and then it's in shows like Stranger Things, like Fringe, which came out in 2012. There's another show, I think it was called Since 8, where they were, I think, in that show experimenting on gifted children. I know there's another one, I'm not sure if that one's it, but it's coming up in media too. And the other thing that's coming up in media, especially in the Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens sphere, is this idea of handlers, especially talking about how Charlie Kirk was maybe being handled by his wife, Erika Kirk. A lot of people speculating that she might be a handler because of her connection to Trump and beauty pageants and family ties, etc. So what does that have to do with you? Were you part of one of these gifted and talented programs? Do you feel like you should have been, but maybe your parents didn't sign the permission slip? Maybe they didn't have it at your school. Regardless of whether you were in it or not, I've noticed a trend that a lot of GATE kids and gifted minds have the feeling of being watched, targeted, or feeling like they have what we would call a handler. So what is a handler? A handler is somebody that people speculate encourage people to go down certain paths. So when you think of what the GATE program actually was, the gifted and talented programs were pulling gifted minds out of school. So these would be literally the top 2% of society who had an IQ of 130 or higher. I'm not sure if each school had a specific cutoff. I know the IQ score that comes up a lot is 140. But if you were in these programs like me, you probably remember the teachers coddling you in a way almost, just constantly telling you how special you were, how you're going to make such a difference. People were in gifted programs for different things. Some people were in it for math, some for science, some because they were gifted creatively in the arts or performing arts. So there's a lot of different areas of giftedness, and one of them was creative thinking, or being able to think outside the box. So I can only speak for myself and my own experience, but when I think back to my very few memories that I actually have of the gifted program, I remember my teacher being very loving and seemingly happy to work with us and excited, and it was just like, wow, you were just such a special child. Like, you remember one of the things that she said to me was, you're better or you're just better at, not better than. So they also instilled a sense of humility in early gifted minds, or young gifted minds. So when I did some digging on the GATE program, I found that currently my school, which was in Ohio, was doing individualized education programs for gifted and talented students. So there was no one size curriculum fits all. Usually they would have a teacher who was also a counselor, or maybe they specialize in teaching gifted minds. But it was usually some kind of outside teacher or somebody who specialized in teaching this type of children, from my understanding and from what I was looking into. So I don't know if that was, again, the same for every single school. That just seems to be a common thread, that the teachers were counselors or they came from outside the school or something. So I thought that was very interesting, though, that the GATE kids had individualized lesson plans. And the way they scouted people for gifted programs, in case you didn't know, was just they typically tested in the top 5% of standardized testing, and then they had special areas of giftedness like math, science, creative and performing arts, etc. So a lot of people from their Gates years remember going to places like NASA or science fairs or museums, field trips where they were bussed out with the other Gate kids and went somewhere like, what's the one, COSI, some kind of science museum or something. That's one of the ones that I remember. Now, was I there with gifted kids or not? I don't remember, but I remember going. So anyways, that seems to be common. And then a lot of people who are in these gifted programs were also asked to attend even more extra gifted programs, like go away for the summer or attend a school that was out of town. So there was clearly an interest in studying gifted minds. And if you look at what is playing out on the big screen and media right now, so just simply taking a look at Charlie Kirk and what Candace Owens has been covering on her podcast, and Erika Kirk, and how a lot of people are speculating that she might have been Charlie's handler. That's just one example of how this idea of being a gifted mind, who was kind of being primed from a young age to have a lot of influence. Because one thing that the higher ups understood and understand about gifted minds is that A, they only make up about 2% of the population, and B, one of the other outstanding qualities of a gifted child is that they were creators and not copiers. So they were the trend starters. They were the ones who had their unique, original ideas. So it makes sense that if you're trying to control a society or a generation, that you would be focused on the gifted minds. So the fact that a lot of gifted minds and gifted people have this kind of feeling when they look back at their life, whether it was teachers or parents or people they dated or people they met in adulthood, a lot of them feel like they have handlers or people kind of guiding the narrative. And that's one of the things I want to get into today. First, to maybe alleviate some fears that some people might be having, but also kind of explain, what do we do if we realize this is happening? Because a lot of us might have handlers and not realize it. And I think the most kind of overlooked thing is the fact that handlers may not always be the type of handlers that we think of when we're thinking of, let's just say, an archetype like Erika Kirk. So somebody who the media portrays as somebody who was born in a family with ties to other countries or wealth or opportunity, somebody who was groomed to do beauty pageants, who met Trump at an early age, who just conveniently met Charlie right before he was rising to the top with Turning Point USA. So that's one very obvious example of how a handler type situation could allegedly play out, right? Like somebody who was kind of groomed from a young age, given specific opportunities, and then encouraged to date certain people. My question is, do these people always know that they're being sent in to be a handler for somebody, or do the handlers have handlers? I made some other videos about it too a couple months ago about handlers and the Archons of the Matrix, because handlers can also be programs that people are unconsciously playing out. So I think there's two types, and I think the more common type are the type of handlers where our family, our friends, and our peers, our bosses, etc., may be unconsciously acting out these programs without even realizing it. So what is the common denominator, though, for like how you could unknowingly end up as a handler, or why you might be targeted to have one? First of all, I think both, what comes down to both situations, so whether or not you're playing the handler for somebody unconsciously or you have the handler, both people, if we're talking about handlers as an archetype and an unconscious archetype, have the common issue that they're not fully awake and aware of their power as a sovereign being. So if you think that you have a handler, if you're obsessing over the fact that you have a handler, if you feel like you have a handler and you're speculating and analyzing about it, etc., well, that might be the first part of your awakening where you realize that you maybe have been unconsciously giving away your power to somebody else. So what usually happens in these situations is that people get really scared, really paranoid. They start to ask, how much power does this person have? How long have I been controlled? How long has this been happening? Start going back into their past, doing some research, trying to maybe connect the dots with who these people are working with. What decisions did you make when you were under their influence, and what was really coming from yourself? So the fact that you're waking up and questioning these things is probably a good thing, because awareness is a start of, bringing something to light so we can heal it, so we can alchemize it. So this was my experience, especially when I started to make this channel. One of the whole reasons I really started to get active on YouTube is because I had what I felt like was a handler type situation when I tried to enter the entertainment industry, and then I was finding out about the GATE program shortly after. So then it made me question my whole entire life and go back to all the relationships I had previously. And did they know me before? Like, did they somehow know that I was gonna want to be an actress in Hollywood or something? Or did they know that I was gonna pursue comedy when I was in my 30s? Why, from a young age, when I was 7 years old, did I always have this idea like, I want to be famous? Maybe not the fame thing, but I always felt like I was going to be famous. I don't know, it's just like weird. I felt like I was going to be famous, and I wanted to be a singer and an actress. So I'm not famous right now, nor am I trying to be famous, because I think that can come with its own set of problems, because you have a whole lot of responsibility as a person who's considered famous. But locally famous, a lot of people know you, a lot of people know me. Yeah, maybe you could say that when I was in the local comedy scene. And I was doing acting stuff by starting my own podcast. And when I started that podcast, a bunch of people, like at least 3 different people that year, came in and tried to get me to put my show on their network. And it's so weird, because I just watched the show Wayne's World last night. It was my first time actually watching that movie. I'm gonna go away from this plane. But I watched Wayne's World, and I just thought it was so funny, because it's about these 2 guys who are starting, or they have like a cable network television show in their house, in their basement. And then some sleazy producer comes along and tries to get them to go on the public network, but they, immediately hands them $5,000, but they have to sign a contract, and that contract has strings attached and things that they don't want to do, which makes sense. If somebody else is paying for your crap, no one's just going to hand you money to continue doing what you're doing. Like, they have an end goal. So, first red flag, if you've ever been worried that you might have a handler, well, A, do you have anything that you're building, that you've been building, that has the potential to influence people? Has anyone ever offered you money or a free platform? Well, these are all signs of potential handlers, but they may not always be the type of handler that you're thinking they are, right? So they may not always be from MK Ultra, from the government, from something else. The thing that I've come to realize since starting this channel, and since talking about it, since continuing to go down the rabbit hole of information about handlers and Monarch programming and MK Ultra and gifted minds and all this stuff, is that there's also, I believe, such a thing as people who are looking for their own power, who are looking for their own sense of importance, people who feel like they don't have certain talents or certain skills. They might feel like they need somebody with a gifted mind, or somebody who has already created the, Noah's Ark of a podcast, and they just want to come along for the ride. So they may portray themselves as some sleazy industry executive. They may have a lot of money saved up for something like this. They may have sketchy ways of making money, I don't know, or they may lie and act like they have money in order to get you to be part of it. Because at least in my situations, a lot of the people who were trying to get me under their wing with my podcast and my comedy show, they kind of acted like they had money, or they were trying to put themselves in a position where I would need their money. And thank God I found out like pretty early on in the game that this was happening, and I realized like, okay, I'm becoming, they're trying to put themselves in a position where I'm like dependent on them for money. And duh, Alex, put 2 and 2 together. If somebody's offering you money or offering you something for free, they're gonna want something in return. So if I'm just accepting things for free without an understanding of what that exchange should be, then I'm part of the problem, right? I'm part of the problem. So I think a huge sign of gifted and intelligence is the ability to be humble and to be able to look at yourself and say, oh, okay, I might have actually been the one in the wrong here. I might have actually not been thinking clearly. So being able to question yourself, because if you can't question yourself, that's literally a sign of narcissism. Like, narcissists will never question whether or not they're wrong. So how do you know if you're a narcissist? Well, you probably don't, because you'll never call yourself a narcissist. But if you at least ever questioned, am I a narcissist, or like, could I have been part of the problem, then you're pretty, odds are you're pretty safe, because like I said, a true narcissist is not going to question whether they're a narcissist. So the fact that you're able to question and to self-reflect, to have internal discernment, and to make those changes once something is brought to your awareness when you realize something is wrong or you weren't acting right, the fact that you can say, okay, I see. I don't want to act like that anymore. I learned from this. I learned quickly from it. So now I'm not going to do it. I'm going to make changes. So I think there's a lot of people probably who have had a similar experience of, these planes are everywhere, who have had a similar experience of coming across a handler. So in the form of somebody, maybe like in my experience, it was somebody you were working with, a peer, somebody who tried to be a manager, somebody in the entertainment industry, etc. Maybe somebody in your work industry, military or some other corporate job. You've got a corporate boss or somebody that might be kind of like a mentor in your career path. But another thing could just be that, sorry, I'm getting distracted with all these planes. I was waiting for them to pass. And now I lost my train of thought. But something about handlers. Okay, now I totally forgot where I was going with that. But anyways, some of us, I don't know, discernment is important so we can, be aware that we're in this type of situation to begin with. And if we never ask ourselves those questions, then we'll never learn or never get a chance to get ourselves out of these situations should they occur, right? But the whole reason that people are attracted to gifted minds in the first place, whether or not it's like an official government handler or something, or if it's just somebody who feels like they don't have the charisma or the talent or the money or the resources to do something on their own, that's what makes gifted minds a target in the first place. And that's why I always say, or why I've been saying more and more, that when it comes to the question, like, do I have a handler? Is my mom a handler? Is my boyfriend a handler? Is my roommate or my mentor a handler? Maybe, but not in the sense that you think. So it's possible that you have continuously attracted people in your life who have felt like they're not as talented as you, or they're not as charismatic, or whatever. They don't have the resources or like the energy you have. So I think it is a very real thing that a lot of gifted minds struggle with throughout their lifetimes. This sounds so egotistical, and I don't mean it in this way at all, but especially if you think of the gifted program, like how gifted kids were kind of treated from childhood, like that they were told repeatedly that they were special. They were literally some people were doing college courses in high school. A lot of kids skipped a grade. A lot of them were told, wow, your IQ is off the charts. Other peers are watching these kids get pulled out of class and, sent to different schools. So whether or not you were already struggling with that feeling of people kind of being envious of you at a young age, or if you were like me, the way I felt about being taken out of class and being a gifted mind was like insecure about it, because I was like, why can't I be with my peers? Why am I always being sent out and isolated? And I felt like a loser, and I felt lonely because I wasn't a part of all the other things that like the regular kids were a part of. So for me, it created more feelings of isolation. So then when I grew up to be an adult, I was very much a people pleaser and always wanted to be a part of something. And I didn't have really great discernment, because another thing that is part of my story, and possibly a lot of other gifted kids' stories, is that because of those feelings of isolation and not being good enough because I was separated or whatever, despite the fact that I was told that I was smart and gifted and all this stuff, I just took on a lot of kind of like the weight of the world and feelings of loneliness and anxiety and isolation. And I found myself on a path of seeking relief through alcohol, or MJ, Mary Jane, and struggled with this in my 20s. It was a way for me to fit in with the other kids because society very much promotes those things, especially to college kids and older. And if you're anything like me, maybe it started in high school where kids were already, going to parties to go out drinking from very young ages. So that became part of my identity at that age because I was just trying to fit in, and I was tired of being like the gifted kid and, the smart one who was pretty much forced by my parents to take all these smart classes that I didn't understand the purpose or the reason behind it when I was in high school or middle school or elementary school or what. So anyways, all that to say, another thing that a lot of gifted minds might struggle with is numbing their pain or their trauma of these early gifted programs through the use of substances. And that can be really detrimental for us because that's one of the things that kind of numbs and quiets our intuition, so that when we come across these handler type situations, we're not always able to recognize that we're being controlled. And that was such is the case for me when I was in the Hollywood industry, trying to make it in Hollywood or whatever with the podcast. I had all these people around me, telling me how awesome I was and how awesome the show was, and wants you to be on his network, and so wants you to host your podcast on their network, and we want to put you on a podcast in LA, and then somebody else wants you to make an appearance, and you're gonna be celebrity guest judge at a local show in the scene. So it was just like a lot of people around me in my orbit who were, kind of acting like the gate teachers did, honestly, like, Alex, you're so awesome, like, let's get you in front of all these people. And because I was just going along with the motions, and I got lost in the whole, industry, the thing that industry people get lost in, especially when it comes to comedy and acting and all that. Like, every night is a party, essentially. So if you allow yourself to become part of that party, your judgment starts to become impaired. And all of a sudden, I find that, months later, as this stuff is all going on, I'm realizing, like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I feel like there's like a demon attacking me. I feel like there's curses on me. I'm witnessing weird supernatural stuff. I'm afraid that these people are doing black magic on me. I'm mentally going downhill, and I'm having a hard time, like, feeling like I'm being controlled in so many ways. I had people trying to influence my love life. I had people trying to get information from me. And then the whole reason I left the industry is because somebody shared some personal information, like, tried to spread all these rumors about stuff that was really embarrassing for me at the time. And when I looked back on it all in retrospect, it was like, oh my God, this is exactly what like people who escape a cult experience. They, are part of something. They've got somebody usually controlling them in some way, shape, or form and guiding them, like acting as the manager or the best friend or the boyfriend or the husband or whatever it is. And they're, getting you to share all your personal details with them. And then if you don't comply with what they want, so in my case, I was not okay with exploitation of other comedians or other people. I did not like what the higher up people were doing or what they were trying to get me to do, because then I would have been like what I considered a person who, was kind of like contributing to the negative systems of Hollywood. And the whole reason I wanted to be in the industry in the first place was like doing things a different way, like showing people you can start your own show. You don't have to like go to all these gatekeeper producers who are like preying on young women. You don't have to work with all these sleazy industry people. I literally thought that the person beside me was like with me on that. But that's how manipulative some people can be. Like, they know they're good at manipulating people. So I didn't see that that's not what they wanted. Or let's say I didn't want to see it, because I think I was getting other good benefits from being a part of this group. So maybe my mind didn't want to see or admit to myself like, oh, actually this isn't as cool as you think it is. Like, you actually might be going down a path that is rather dangerous or harmful, or might be harmful to people around you. And I attribute a lot of that to, the casual things I was doing, like going out for a drink or going to the dispensary with my friends for legal stuff. You know what I mean? So nothing illegal, but just common practices in the industry. And all that stuff kind of just putting a filter on my intuition, so I wasn't thinking clearly. And this is okay, so this is actually crazy. This is going to be a crazy side rabbit hole, because when I've talked about handlers on my channel before, something else that comes up is Monarch programming. And a name that comes up when people talk about Monarch programming is a man named Michael Aquino. Michael Aquino talked about on my channel plenty of times, because he's mentioned in the book that is essentially the Monarch programming manual by Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler, who wrote a book called The Illuminati Formula Used to Create an Undetectable Total Mind Controlled Slave. He also wrote another book about the 13 bloodlines. So essentially the 8 mega corporations that run the country that go, they have a bunch of different, like a triangle pyramid of other companies that are named different things, but essentially it's all coming from the top. It's all coming from the same centralized systems that are kind of controlling everything and collaborating together on top, while Americans believe that you're buying, Tom's from Maine toothpaste that supports the environment, but really it's owned by Procter & Gamble or whoever it's owned by, Johnson & Johnson, whatever, one of those companies. So that's how they're getting us one way. And so anyways, Michael Aquino is mentioned in this book as a programmer. And shortly after the book comes out, Fritz Springmeier, who allegedly helped Cisco Wheeler escape from her family, who was part of this, trafficking or this kind of ritual abuse. He got, I think he got arrested for armed robbery and assault or something like that. So my question is, maybe the question for a lot of people is like, was that stuff planted? Like, did somebody set him up because he revealed all this information? Or was he just some random guy who just wanted to be part of uncovering this mystery? Did he have some mental stuff going on when he wrote it? Because that book is definitely very fanatical and it's very paranoid, but it goes really deep into all this stuff. It goes into Saturn and Luciferianism, programming tactics. It has like 4 or 5 pages of substances that were used in the MK Ultra experiments for programming. It talks about all the organizations that were involved. There's so much information that is shared there. And then he talks about how the mind is like a computer and there's different codes that programmers run. And like I said, Michael Aquino is mentioned in the book. So who is Michael Aquino? He's a big guy in our military. He wrote a book co-authored a book called From PsyOps to MindWar, with, I think his name was like Paul E. Valley or something like that. But I just randomly decided that I was going to, because I keep mentioning Michael Aquino on my channel, like maybe I should like watch some interviews with this guy to check it out, because I don't want to be spreading misinformation, but it's just like knowing that about the book, knowing that he's part of the military, knowing that he wrote From PsyOps to MindWar and knows a lot about psychological operations, kind of led me to connect some dots, thinking, well, maybe that, and also the fact that he potentially had some ties to the gifted program because of his mother's alleged involvement in one of the earliest run gifted studies, kind of makes me connect all those things and think, wow, well, that's, to me, telling me like maybe that's something we should be concerned about. But again, I don't want to spread misinformation. So I went and I watched some interviews with him, and I thought it was so interesting because I watched one that was like 9 years old or something. And he was talking all about psychological operations and like the research that he did for the book. And then he was even talking about the Temple of Set. So that was another reason that I was kind of iffy about this guy in the first place, because I'm like, okay, Temple of Set is an offset of Satanism. So what is Satanism? Satanism, some people will say it's like all about like you being your own God, you not conforming to any religion. So you're understanding that you have the power as an individual, and there's no such thing, I guess, to some Satanists as bad or good. I think that's the idea of it anyways. But Michael Aquino, I think, was talking about the Temple of Set and how instead of Satan, who is man or religion's god, they use an Egyptian deity, which has been around since the beginning of time, and they were doing Egyptian rituals. And of course the guy was questioning him like, well, what about, your supposed involvement with, the children, or what about your supposed, what would you say to people who think Satanism is connected to child sacrifice or animal sacrifice? And then he was all nonchalant about it, like, oh no, that's ridiculous. No, we're not doing that. So I was talking to my friend about it, and I'm like, this guy is coming off as like really normal and really intelligent, And I'm like, have I been misquoting like his intentions or something? And my friend's like, well, remember, psychopaths are really good at lying and hiding stuff. So I don't really know what to think about that. Or now I'm trying to remember why I even brought this up, but I don't really know, what to make of that. But I think what I'm trying to say is that it all comes down to our personal discernment. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about what he said about the mind war type stuff, his claims for writing the book was that it was all about waking men or people up to the fact that we don't have to keep fighting each other or blowing each other up. And then he was talking about things like colors and brainwaves, like essentially, brainwaves, like I talk about on this channel all the time, and how people are more susceptible to being programmed a certain way or feeling a certain way when they're in specific brainwaves. So one of the things that he mentioned from his mouth, the man who wrote a book on psychological operations, is that when people are in alpha, they're more in a lighthearted mood. When they're in beta, they're more anxious and jittery. And he was also talking about colors and how colors have an effect on people, like red being more activating and aggressive and a symbol of power, blue being more happy, peaceful, and relaxed, green being more docile. So I just thought it was interesting that he was talking about all this stuff. And I just found desert treasure. Hold on. Oh, I don't know what that is. Okay, something buried. Something like metal. Okay, anyways. So yeah, he's talking about color theory and brainwave states. So why does that matter for this conversation about handlers and whether or not you might particularly have a handler? So all that stuff is important to realize because, he's a person that's high up in the military that has presented the president of the United States and people in the CIA and our governing bodies with copies of his book, especially the remastered version that came out, 10 years ago or whatever. So I think he's deceased now. I think he died in 2019. But the fact that, he was still handing the president copies of these books. So clearly these organizations respected his opinion on PsyOps and psychological control. So all of that to say goes back to the original kind of theory that I'm presenting here, is that all these people that we might consider handlers may not even be consciously doing it. So a lot of these people might be acting because of the content they're absorbing on TV and media. Michael Aquino, in that interview, or the interviews I watched a bunch of stuff on YouTube, just Googled his name or whatever, searched for his name on YouTube, and a bunch of interviews and videos came up. So he also mentioned frequencies and how frequencies can control people and put people in specific moods. So when he was explaining this, he was all like, well, we believe that men are, they want to do mostly good, and Temple of Set is, I don't know, he was just saying, he was talking about morality a lot, and the way he was speaking kind of made it seem like he was a nice guy. It was like trying to do this for the greater good of humanity. And sometimes you have to do bad things to affect people in a good way, which is, kind of concerning or telling in itself, because you think of like the reason why a lot of these people or these elites may be involved in such dark things like, animal sacrifice or SRA and all that stuff. It's like, are they doing it because they believe in the greater good of something else? I don't know. I'm just asking questions here. It's just things that are making me think. But my gut feeling is that the majority of these handler types people, and why we ourselves become victim to them, is that the psychological warfare is happening all around us. And most of us don't even realize it. So if you're a person that's still kind of just mindlessly consuming heavy metal music or, death metal or pop music, most of pop music, sad country music, even indie music that's all sad and talking about addiction and heartbreak and all that stuff. They're using certain tones that literally mess with your emotions. Like, I don't know if you're anything like me, I just play a couple A minor chords and E minor chords in a row and I can cry really easily. So I'm very sensitive to music and tones and frequencies myself, which is why I really don't listen to music anymore unless I'm intentionally listening to it and I'm choosing the artist that I'm listening to, and it's like high vibe stuff, the stuff that's going to put me in a good mood, not stuff that's going to make me pine over my ex when I was having a good day, and now all of a sudden I'm listening to a sad song and I'm so empathic that I'm like, oh my God, that just made me think of that one guy that was like so awful to me, but like this song is so artistic and like they just captured the feeling so perfectly of like missing your ex, and maybe I should call them. Okay, so that's why we end up in these handler situations, because we're not paying attention to our own frequency. So again, if you're anything like me, with the casualization of alcohol and MJ and dispensaries in this lifestyle. So because I wasn't in control of my frequency and my own habits of thought and behavior, all that stuff was influencing my psyche in a negative way. And the other thing that is so telling that Michael Aquino said in a lot of the interviews that I was watching is that when the subject of MK Ultra and Monarch programming came up, of course he denied the Monarch programming as being real and said it was all rumors. But when he talked about MK Ultra, he said all that stuff was like, $20 million just like thrown away, smoke and mirrors, because they were putting people in fearful states of consciousness, and they were using like different, like LSD or different substances in order to do that, to fracture the mind and psyche and essentially destroy people. But guess what? They don't need handlers anymore, because we are handling ourselves. We are handling ourselves. We are handling ourselves. So many people who watch this channel, this is like who I'm trying to reach and who I'm trying to wake up, because I wish somebody, had been more tough love with me. I wish I had stopped drinking and stopped doing this stuff 10 years earlier, because I would have saved myself a lot of heartache and bad decisions. And it's just so crazy to me that we are willingly consuming these things that are literally making our minds fractured. We are making ourselves paranoid when we're doing these things. And then we continue to reach for that same substance over and over again because of the relief and because of, what these pharmaceutical companies or like whatever manufacturers or marketers are telling us. Like think of dispensary products, for example, how marijuana these days has about 30%, sometimes more THC than the marijuana in the 70s, which only had like 1 to 3%. So 30% THC, especially if you're doing it multiple times a day, versus 1% THC when you're doing it multiple times a day, it's so easy to get addicted when you are doing it at such high levels. Not to mention that man is crossbreeding this stuff aggressively to make it more addictive so they can profit. Let me say that again. So they can profit. So all these gifted minds and people who could otherwise be making a difference in society and, be our own handlers, so we're not kind of blindly following along other people or like acting in subconscious ways that aren't like us. All that stuff can absolutely be impairing our judgment and kind of putting us in these states that Michael Aquino, the man who wrote about psychological operations and warfare, talked about himself, how these substances put people in fearful states of mind and it just destroys them. So again, like we're destroying ourselves. So whatever, and I think a lot of us are kind of like, we feel like there's some kind of invisible enemy, like the elite, some kind of unspoken enemy that we're all kind of fighting against. But what if we don't even have an entity on top anymore? It's kind of like the movie, was it Leave the World Behind, the one with Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke, where at the end of the movie it's like, who is the elite even? Because all the people are acting like maniacs, because maybe some people at the top kind of started this, maybe it was decades or hundreds of years ago, but because now individual people are motivated by money, they're motivated by power, they're motivated by addiction, they're motivated by wanting somebody to like them. Now all these people have their own motivations, and if you're not policing your own frequency, if you're not able to be honest with yourself, if you're not able to do the hard thing and be like, what, I don't want to be addicted to this because I don't want to be controlled by this. If you're not able to do that, then you're just one of those people who's being controlled like a puppet. So I say this with love, and I say this with hopes that if you find yourself in one of these, experiences where you're, realize like, holy crap, like I am being controlled by what I'm consuming. I've felt like my parents have been handlers, but if I'm being honest with myself, it's like, well, like, maybe I feel that way because of the decisions that I've been making. So I think all of this to say is that the most important thing for people to remember, if you feel like you are being mentally controlled, if you feel like you have ever had a handler, if you feel like you're being watched and controlled, to be able to be radically honest with yourself and ask yourself, well, what's going on with my mental? Like, am I taking care of myself to do things like meditation, like where I'm quieting my mind, quieting the noise from the outside world? Am I doing things like grounding myself in nature, getting away from technology? Am I unfollowing accounts that make me paranoid? Am I creating boundaries with people who cross over mine? Am I limiting my intake of junk food, of sugar, which is all addictive? Am I limiting or quitting mind-altering substances altogether? Is it possible that these feelings of paranoia, of feeling watched, of feeling controlled, actually stem back to my own habits of behavior and things that I've been doing myself because I haven't really been a good gatekeeper? So that's something that I had to come to terms with it within myself. And it wasn't always easy to come to that realization that I'm just not being a good gatekeeper, because it's a lot easier to blame somebody else. It's a lot easier to play the victim. But I had a great conversation with somebody in my DMs the other day talking about just like how so many people these days want somebody to blame. They want somebody to crucify. They want somebody to be that bad guy. And when probably the gate kid, because right, you're 2%. So if there's hope for anyone to break some of these cycles and these curses within the generations, it's you that's watching this, because the average American is not going to probably have the intelligence or the discernment or the mental acuity to be like, yeah, maybe I'm the problem, or maybe it hurts less to actually continue acting in a narcissistic way, because then you never have to admit to yourself that you're a problem. I mean, you never have to do the hard work of sitting down with a journal and a pen and a piece of paper and like being brutally honest with yourself and quitting those habits that felt good in the moment, but if you're being honest with yourself, they're really not helping you move forward in life. So taken from me, from somebody who willingly got sober, willingly attended the first AA meeting by myself, not because I was put in a rehab program or I got in an accident or because I lost my job or anything like that. I willingly went to AA meetings because I saw other people had some kind of freedom that I didn't have, and I willingly went because I knew that me chasing a bottle every single day or every other day, or even if it was just weekend warrior binging, I'm waking up with hangovers. I can't live up to my full potential. I know I'm not. Like, I'm overweight. I look like I've got cystic acne everywhere. Like, my cheeks are all red and puffy. I'm not dating the people I want. I'm not getting the jobs that I want. Like, I'm the friggin' problem. And I think it's so empowering to admit that to yourself, because if you're not the problem, you're not the solution. So we can run around, like, there's so many people just running around chasing hidden enemies, whether it's, the secret government cabal, it's all these conspiracies that are wrong with the world. And so many people just fail to look at themselves and realize it all starts with me. Because if my mind isn't clear, like Michael Aquino, the PsyOps guy himself said, if you're in these frantic states of consciousness because of what you're consuming with your body, like plant medicine, right? Called plant medicine. So the people who are selling it can continue to make more money and continue to get you to go to their healing retreats. But really the ones 99% of the time who are actually teaching you, to help you heal are hopelessly addicted to the substances themselves. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind in a lot of cases. And that's, part of why people say the new age agenda is a satanic agenda, because it's ego driven. How many spiritual teachers out there are like, I channel beings, like, this is what's going to happen. I know everything. So my rule of thumb when it comes to teachers like that is like, use your discernment. How does it feel when somebody says it? If it is something that makes you feel anxious or scared, then it's probably not good information. If it's something that makes you feel like you have to, you have to take their course or you have to do this, like there's, I'm speaking as somebody who has courses that you can take, but I always tell people, like, these are guidebooks, like, pay it once and do the course, like, to acknowledge me for the time and energy and effort that I put into it. But I'm not ever going to tell people, like my tarot clients or my astrology clients, like, you have to depend on me forever to just keep coming back to me. I love working with people because I like to teach them stuff so they can learn how to do it themselves and they can have empowerment moving forward. So a teacher that's going to continuously position themselves as an expert and not remind you that you have your own expertise inside, and they're not teaching you to, giving you tools to develop that. There's nothing wrong with the exchange of money, but there is something wrong with the attitude of, you can't do this yourself, you need me, and I'm better than you. Like, I always like to think of myself as an equal. Like, I'm just somebody who happened to figure out certain things, and maybe you are ahead in other areas, but maybe we can combine our knowledge and we can both become better humans by doing so. So anyways, all that to say, hope you got something out of this video today. I hope you feel empowered. And if you find yourself struggling with substance abuse, with addiction, with your own personal beliefs and fears, and you're trying to unravel from all that, I do have tools. I've got free tools and I have paid tools, all in the description all in the description of every single video. So you can check out the links there. I've got a moon calendar, which is really helpful if you are neurodivergent or ADHD, or just into, somebody who needs to be in your feminine energy versus the masculine energy of do. Lunar calendars are really great for kind of teaching us to lean into that feminine energy, like wait, learn how to receive something, rest when your body needs to, and act when your body needs to. So that's why lunar calendars are so helpful with that. And I have my unique way of creating them. So you can find that in the description. And I also work with people one-on-one. I think astrology and human design are amazing tools for self-development because they help you recognize your original and unique blueprint. And my life changed when I had mine done. So that's why I teach it now, because I like to help other people wake up to who they are, to their own strengths, because I want people to have freedom that I have. That's what I want. That's why I'm doing this. I want you to have freedom so you don't have to always be, going to those online tarot readers like, what's the right answer? What's the right answer? I want you to have those answers within. So that being said, thanks for watching this video. Thanks for being a part of this community. Thanks for helping me reach 5K. I'm so excited, so grateful for each and every one of you. And I will see you guys in the next video.